In 2010, Thomas Thwaites decided he wanted to build a toaster from scratch. He walked into a shop, purchased the cheapest toaster he could find, and promptly went home and broke it down piece by piece. Thwaites had assumed the toaster would be a relatively simple machine. By the time he was finished deconstructing it, however, there were more than 400 components laid out on his floor. The toaster contained over 100 different materials, with three of the primary ones being plastic, nickel, and steel. He decided to create the steel components first. After discovering the iron ore was required to make steel, Waits called up an iron mine in his region and asked if they would let him use some for the project. Surprisingly, they agreed. The toaster project. The victory was short lived. When it came time to create the plastic case for his toaster, Waits realized he could need crude oil to make the plastic. This time, he called up BP and asked if they would fly him out to an oil rig and lend him some oil for the project. They immediately refused. It seems companies are not nearly as generous as iron mines. Wade said to settle for the collecting plastic scraps and melting them into the shape of his toaster case. This is not as easy as it sounds. The homemade toaster ended up looking like looking more like a melted cake than a kitchen appliance. This pattern continued for the entire span of the toaster project. It was nearly impossible to move forward without the help of some previous process. To create the nickel components, for example, he had to resort to melting old coins. He would later say, I realized that if you started absolutely from scratch, you could easily spend your life making a toaster. Don't start from scratch. Starting from scratch is usually a bad idea. Too often, we assume innovative ideas and meaningful changes require a blank slate. When business projects fail, when business project fail, he says things like, let's go back to the drawing board. When he considered the habit we would like to change, we think, I just need a fresh start. However, a creative progress is rarely the result of throwing out all the previous ideas and innovations and completely reimagining of the world. Consider an example from nature. Some experts believe the feathers of birds evolved from reptilian scales. Through the forces of evolution, scales gradually became small feathers, which were used for warmth and insulation at first. Eventually, these small fluffs developed into the larger feathers capable of flight. There wasn't a magical moment when the animal kingdom said, let's start from the scratch and create an animal that can fly. The development of flying birds was a gradual process of uh, iterating and expanding upon ideas that already worked. The process of human flight followed a similar path. We typically created a Orville and Wilbur Wright as the inventor of the modern flight. However, we seldom discuss the aviation pioneer who preceded them like Otto Littleton, Samuel Langley, and Octave John. The Wright brothers learned from and built upon the work of these people during their quest to create the world's first flying machine. The most creative innovations are often new combination of old ideas. Innovative thinkers don't create, they connect. Furthermore, the most effective way to make progress is usually by making a 1% improvements to make to what already works rather than breaking down the whole system and starting over. Irritate, nahi, iterate, don't originate. The toaster project is an example of how we often fail to notice the complexity of our modern world. When you buy a toaster, you don't think about everything that has to happen before it appears in the store. You are not aware of the iron being carved out of the mountain or the oil being drawn up from the earth. We are mostly blind to the remarkable interconnectedness of things. This is important to understand because in a complex world, it is hard to see which forces are working for you as well as which forces are working against you. Similar to buy a toaster, we tend to focus on the final product and fail to recognize the many processes leading up to. When you are dealing with a complex problem, it is usually better to build upon what already works. Any idea that is currently working has passed a lot of tests. Old ideas are a secret weapon because they have already managed to survive in a complex world.